Hello, Lisa Starr. So good to see you again. How are you?
I'm good. I'm happy to see someone far across the world in an adventure in India.
Yes, it is really great. Really, really great to meet you from the other side of the world. For whoever's listening for the first time, Lisa Starr, you are one of my elders, my wise elder, experienced teachers of natural time and mind wisdom with over 26 years of daily experience of exploring life through this incredible calendar. And we've been meeting now for the ninth consecutive month moon in a row to speak about the month in the perspective of the 13 moon calendar. And today we're meeting on the 9 month, inside the 9 month, the solar moon. And we'll be diving into what this means on a personal level, collective level, emotional level, and also going into some practical tips and perspectives that can help our listeners kind of pass this month with high flow. Uh, the word that came up was like lubricants, like flow nicely on the waves that we experience during this 9 month, during this ninth moon, the solar moon. And as I told you before we started, I'm really in tune with the solar tone. I really understand it in my body, this feeling, I'm really understanding it when I see it through other people clearly. But when it comes to an entire month, an entire moon, with the quality of the solar tone, I'm wondering how it's showing up for me in my life. And I'd obviously ask you how it's showing up for you in your life, because you have a clearer observation than I do on how this can look like.
Well, it's always faster than anything recent. I think that I may have mentioned this in an earlier pod or an earlier edition of our conversation, but like the overtone moon is very like on fire or has this sense of, intensity or increased speed. And then I think we kind of dip out of that. And then on the solar moon, it flares again. And all the language of it being solar to me, you can instantly just track that we are like the sun. That's why it's an adjective to describe being sun-like. So we have a lot of power, we have a lot of reach. Uh, and yeah, it's like elementally fiery and streaming. And so I just feel like that lived experience is just a lot of life force and directionality and intention, which is the word, that is very much chosen by Jose Arguelles for this time.
Yes. So as I anticipated here in India, the electricity is very, very silly. Speaking about the solar, the sun energy that's always pulsing here in India, it's a very, as I told you earlier, very feminine land. And so the sun, it comes and goes. The electricity, it comes and goes regularly. It's a part of the frequency of this place. So we're
And I
getting it.
love it.
Yeah,
It has a nice spectacle on our end, sort of
it
a very
does.
slow strobe. Yeah.
That's how it feels also inside. Yeah, very much. So I'm definitely I can resonate with the higher life force energy and kind of fiery insides that are starting to realize that there is something new is in the near distance, and it wants to show up in front of me, and it's kind of like subconsciously I feel this inner kind of excitement, like flare, like, ooh, something new wants to show up. What is this new? And then I'm working with these processes of so what's showing up in front of me right now, and what is it telling me about what it wants to turn into in the future? And so from what I understand, the solar tone, obviously it's connected with the power of intention. And so how how would you identify when does intention show up? Like, how does it work, this moment that we suddenly realize we have a clear and very bright intention for ourselves? What is this kind of movement?
Well, this is when I feel not just like your elder, but like an old lady with a lot of very formed opinions about the calendar, intractable formed opinions. So I guess I'll start with what that is, because I mean, I think I've been really dedicated to the shape of the wave spell for so many of the years. In the beginning, it's like the tribes themselves are the excitement. Each day has an icon. What is that meaning? And then I think moving into the wave spells is is like a more of an intellectual process that also is sensual, like feeling what this means instead of just totally understanding a word that is more of an adjective and nondescript than some of these animal totems, etc. So, like, I really believe that the solar moon is connected to all of the eight moons before it. Like, it isn't just like suddenly I have a bunch of intentions that I want, or my mind is clear and I'm going to try this. It's to me very much connected to the purpose that started in the magnetic moon. They're absolutely linked. It's just that we're so much farther along in a growth process, sort of made naked behind our ego. You know, when we start a Gregorian year, it's like, this is what I want to change. This is my resolve. This is what I want to get out of this year. And I have said this before here with you that that is not real for following natural time and following my Mayan cycles. You receive in the beginning. You get it. It's karma that lands in your lap and it reflects something that's coming from a divine source. And of course, it matters in your lived life. It's not out of nowhere, but you get it, but you don't really have the skills to make it happen. And you have to go through all these growth pieces of a process until now. Now, when it's the ninth moon, not the first moon, not in the beginning, but really, if you think about it, the ninth moon is almost like a whole uh, cycle of gestation in the womb for, a human being. So here we are. It's like could be a birth for something that started at the beginning of the year. And so what is born is the kind of self-knowledge and awareness of the landscape around you, just a lot of clear perception so that you can say, you know what, this is my intention and I want it to happen. And that conversation of intention is happening to my imagining with the sun itself, the sun representing your divine realm, your God, you're a giver of life. And so it's just that switch that we can't have that clear conversation at the beginning because we haven't done the work or been through the fire. And here we have, and we've struggled and we've persevered and we've stayed open. And so we can basically trust that what we're naturally waking up in the morning wanting to happen in our lives is grounded and true versus kind of a fantasy. Does that? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That definitely makes fits in the structure in my mind of how the flow of the wave works, and I can definitely relate to that. Well, it's not surprising. I mean, I'm like you and a bit different, but I've been riding these waves for 14 years now, so it's very clear to me when I feel this motion in my life, and I could definitely see my life through the lens of the eight different moons we've been through so far, and can really feel how it was all a build up to this point. And still, this point, I know how Jose Arquiles, he kind of drew out the wave spell like a spiral, and that there's like a turning point, an energetic turning point along the wave spell on the overtone day, and then on the solar day, and on the crystal day. And I always find that when it's like really like turning a corner that you don't know what's waiting on the other side of the corner. And it really feels like this in the solar tone. And now I'm feeling it really strong in the solar moon. It's like, it's very clear that new things are showing up in a clear way. but they're just, it's like flashes of light. It's like, pow, wow, I see that. I just saw that really clearly, really aligned in myself. I'm really sure that this wants to happen. This is a step I should take, or this is something I should communicate out to the world that's clear to me. But it's still like flares, like solar flares. Like it shows up kind of like a shooting star, and I see it clear for a few moments, and then it goes back. And then sometime later comes another kind of moment of realization, of real clarity of what's going on right now inside of me and what it's asking me to, how it's directing me, or um, focusing my inner vision. So I take very clear steps from this point, or set very clear intentions. But I can really feel how it's a, also this, it's the whole moon process. Like it's not just from the first big moment of the month I started to see things clear. It's kind of building up and building up and building up, and I can really feel it inside as energy that's building up and building up, and that really soon, I'm not sure yet exactly what, is something new is going to start to open up in front of my eyes. This is how I'm feeling it.
Well, that's what I meant. Like, I feel so intractable, meaning like I completely like hearing about your process. And then for me as the teacher, or, and just because I guess I find a consistency in my message, and also I open myself to explore and feel all of these stages because it's a lived personal learning process, right? I learn more things each time I rotate through the cycles, but I'm very committed to this idea that the 13 moons are a wave that peaks at the planetary moon, next moon, and that the solar moon is kind of the rush of getting almost to the peak. You can really feel it if you've ever, hiked up a mountain, it's kind of intense. And then you see the peak, or you sense that you're almost there. You see a bigger horizon line, more sky, and you know the journey that got you there, but you're very elated that you're almost there. And I match that with the solar tone. I also, like I said, really feel like to sit in conversation with the sun, be allowed the audience where you feel like you really are heard or directly in contact with your higher power is very like heart racing and, beating and feeling excited. And it's very special to have that moment where it feels like a clear line. And then the final piece is that what I meant about being a teacher is I just very much teach that all of these moons in a year are connected, and they're all coming out of what began. That the first magnetic moment is like a seed kernel out of which a whole tree will grow. And maybe some years are giant trees and some years are like small plants, but all the information and the karma is in that magnetic moon, and you can't handle it or understand it or see it or translate it and make sense of it. But by now, the part of you that's really kind of sees like the light inside that karma and like, this is what I need to go for. So I don't think of it for me as like new ideas coming in, but rather the refinement of something that's been churning for all these moons
Mm.
before. But I mean, I'm kind of like obsessive in my psychology. So maybe like I have a restriction in how I view this time because that creates order for me in this spiritual path that I follow. And I'm not like, not open to it being too flexible. The solar moon for me and the planetary moon that follows are very much just a clear moment where I see a relationship between selves and God. And like yeah, that's what I would
I
say.
like that. I like that very much. Yeah, so what kind of processes do you find yourself going through in the solar moon in this time in relation to this moon?
Well, like again, I think some of these moons tones support the human ego better than others. So to really feel like you can get a lot done and are not obstructed and you can move really fast is kind of what we want from humans, like productivity and clarity of thought and dynamic. Like this is not a depressed time, right? It could be an anxious time. It doesn't have to be like you can have imbalance and suffering in the solar moon, but it would come out more in like I'm rattled because I'm kind of, quaking from the speed of how life is changing around me, instead of like I don't have any desire to be here. So like I experience the solar moon as very grounded in fast pace and piercing focus.
Mm.
Um, and it's helpful then, right? Because if you're a creative type or you're a depressive type or just like sensitive to the world being intense. Like this is a moment where you feel more power inward. I do. I feel like, okay, well, I have this time where I should just go for it. I mean, I make that choice, like get it done right now.
Mm.
And truly, because again, thinking back to our vernacular about the Gregorian calendar and starting a new year with intentions and resolutions, you can kind of just transpose that to this moment. But the whole universal Mayan teaching supports that. So if there's something you really want to get done, jump in right now because it's supporting the fulfillment of intention.
Mm.
And it's allowing you to trust what you believe to be your path right now. You're not convoluted and ill-equipped to decide what to do with your life. Right now, you are supported with clarity of purpose and like dive in.
Yeah, beautiful. I
And one other,
really
oh,
relate
go
to that.
ahead.
I just saying I really relate to that.
Sorry. I, have followed the calendar since before the internet and cell phones, and I was probably a little bit slower to those than some of the innovators, but what I've observed is that the way the internet and telecommunication, cellular exchanges that are instantaneous and constant, that is really solar energy, things moving at the speed of light all the time. So there is something compatible about how modern life is situated in technology with the pace and frequency of the solar moon. So that's another facet that you can pay attention to is that when it's not the solar moon, but we're still supposed to move at this pace, it would be really out of balance because we have it 1 out of 13 in the Mayan cycles instead of all the time. But basically, you can feel almost like you just have so much comfort with things moving fast right now. And you can recognize that that would be almost reckless if you tried to do that year round.
Definitely. That would be too much for sure. For sure,
Right.
yeah. And
And here we
I'm curious to talk a bit about the solar people now that we're in the solar moon, because for me, really, the way I learned these tones to begin with is through the people. I was checking their signs and discovering because the vision was very clear to me to identify this these notions through people and how they look and how they behave. And I've noticed about solar people, people that were born on the solar day, that they have something about the tone of their voice and how they say things they're sure about that really pierce through the reality. It's like when they're clear about something they say they intend to do, it's really like they're sending a kind of energetic ray of light into piercing with it into the future and creating it in that moment in the future they'll be walking into, that what they said is going to be what's going to actually happen. And I've noticed that these people have the real ability to do that, and they live in such a way. And it's something about their voice that signifies the frequency that through which they manifest in this way. and create in the world in this way. And it's something I've always been really impressed about. It's something I'm so curious about how subtle it might seem, or how something, a person that's not aware of this perspective would never maybe guess that these people have something different because it's so subtle. But I notice it, and it's really not subtle. It's very clear. These people are creating their own reality using their intentions and the way they communicate them out into the world. I wonder if you also have gotten to see this.
Well, I always love being really transparent that I'm just a human being, not some like wise woman. I mean, I suppose I might have some developed expertise, but when you ask me the question, I'm like an 8-year-old because I was raised by a blue solar eagle. And in fact, my mother, and in fact, she follows the calendar. She studied with Jose Arguelles, so I wouldn't really have known about the calendar if she hadn't exposed me to it. Although, our practices have evolved to be very different, which is sort of funny, right? Two people in a family who don't really do it the same way. But I felt it was quite excruciating to be in the realm of a solar person because she's always in intentionality and
Mm,
always like I'm talking, I suppose, about like maybe the shadow energy, and you've shown the light, but the thing I always would want to say to a person who is solar is just recognize that the rest of the world isn't, also solar. That in
yeah.
your intentionality, you come into a situation, whether it's a relationship or a work experience, and you are um, absolutely bringing the fire that's needed. Like, we got this, like a high school basketball coach. Like, you can just inspire everyone with your clear seeing and your um, just that push behind you. But like that would be exhausting. Sorry, over here we're not in India, but we have a cat dog thing going on. Do something, cat. Run away. Run away. Um, So yeah, that's all I would add to that is just that solar people are really clear, but the world is not, and they can't penetrate every veil, and that there's a certain arrogance to think that, if I just say it enough, it's going to happen. It requires the manifestation component. You have to be working in tandem, which we'll get to next moon, the planetary moon. And there is just a ton of humility that comes in the planetary tone. So I think that solar people may never learn like the true limitation of being a planetary being, that we're not light beings, unless they're listening. And a lot of people who are solar are not following this calendar, so they can be really dynamic and blasting this light into situations, but they may not be able to get traction in what they're manifesting for themselves, and they might be floating a bit.
Yeah,
But
I can
I
see
don't want to
that.
pigeonhole people. I just throwing that out as a bit of a like very deep personal exposure, and using my exposure to my mom to not just say all people are like this perception I have of her, but rather like, oh, that is a continuum, you know.
Yeah,
Intentionality can be really overused and be kind of an excuse for spiritual people to force their way. So I just like intention to be building out of all of these phases before, again, almost like indigenous people doing so much preparation for a ceremony, whereas maybe in modern times we don't take the moment to prepare for our sacred acts. And that we have in the calendar all of this preparation, and then finally we have our audience with God. Does that make sense?
yeah, I definitely can see that analogy. I can see this beautiful description how you described it. And I agree with you completely. It's kind of like when we feel on fire, and when we're on fire, it's like we know we have this fire within us all the time, and most of the time we're not on fire. we might have moments in the day, in the week, in the month, we suddenly feel, maybe as women, you have in your own natural cycle times you would expect to be more energetic and kind of on things. But generally, we're not made to be on fire all the time. Also, if we look at athletes, for example, that they train to a master level to excel at almost any given moment they choose, they have days that they can tune into their energetic source, their inner sun, and give it their all and succeed. And then they have days that they can try and give it their all and they don't succeed. And there's days that even if they try, they can't give it their all. And these people are training every day, devoting their life to being on top, of anything that comes in front of them. So obviously, us humans that are just living a humble kind of existence, we can't expect ourselves to be on fire and in tune all of the time. So when it does happen, we really feel enlightened, illuminated for a continuum. And hopefully it lasts more than a couple of minutes or a couple of hours or a couple of days. Maybe if I look at myself personally, I can really remember times that I really felt illuminated for more than a few moments, and how it felt to go through reality when I was feeling this way. And it was quite intense. I mean, it wasn't something I would necessarily wish to be experiencing all the time. So it is a very kind of limited phase, like the natural movement of the wave that we pass through, in which we have these qualities that are more aligned with us, and really when we're so in tune and on fire, we can actually manifest things much more powerfully and directly and clearly than other times. And then when we talk about solar people, that their access to this ability is much higher than the average person, it could really be scorching often. It could really be, like you say with your mother, like too much intentionality all the time, and especially if it's being projected as an expectation for the people around, because most of us were not aware. I mean, one of the most amazing things that this tool of the Dream Spell calendar and the 13 Moon calendar are giving me is the ability to identify the uniqueness of every person in front of me, and to kind of give them the space to be themselves, and not try to change them because of how they make me feel, or not try to change myself because of how I feel around someone. And so I think being a solar person that's unaware of this quality within you could really be a challenging experience to live around ordinary humans, that are not so directly vibrating solar energy a lot of the time. And yet, saying that, I can't recall a solar person I've met that I've ever felt like so stretching it so far. Most of the solar people I meet, because of this quality of clarity, inner clarity, they're actually quite switched on, from my experience, to recognize when it's time to up the fire and when it's time to just kind of chill with it. This was my experience. I didn't have a solar mother, obviously, so when it's in your own family, so you see all 360 degrees of the quality of that person. And so obviously you have it on a deeper level. For example, my mother is overtone like me, so it taught me to become very familiar with these qualities also within me much easier. Yeah, so
Well,
I think, yeah, you go.
I was just remembering that my mom has a twins who's solar, and then her other brother is solar. So maybe like I just have this ancestral
Solar
like
ancestry.
um anyway, what I feel like bringing in, and we'll get into more next moon, is that I think it's very important to see the relationship between solar and planetary, and to bring that in, because as you're living the solar moon, I do have one piece of guidance that I think is important, which is to not have overconfidence that this clarity and intentionality is going to yield manifestation. Because to me, there's so much light and clarity that we've earned, that's built up in us, that we kind of are imbued with because we're riding a wave, right? We didn't make the wave. We're on a wave that has been kind of delivered to us as karma, and our awakeness to the wave is what we do as a process here. So the thing that happens is that solar means that we speak like the sun. This is how I imagine it. We speak like the sun. It's like knowing a language. I know the language of the sun, so I get to sit and have this direct communication with the sun. And then the sun is like this sort of benevolent parental figure to me. And so when it's the planetary tone right after, it's like the sun speaking my language as a planetary being and saying, in my view, like, that's great. I'm like, got your list of all the things you think would be great as outcomes in your life. But what I'm going to give you is basically what you can handle and need on planet Earth, on your planet. You know, if it were planet Mars, what we're here on, the planetary reality is here on Earth. And so the manifestation isn't going to be infinite light or boundless power. You know, it's going to be what we can handle in our bodies and what is appropriate for our karma as living beings on Earth. And so again, like feeling like I can do anything. And it's not ego to say that right now. It's just like it's like being lifted and set free. It is like being a star, not just even an animal that flies, but like I'm way off this planet right now. I have all this space and I'm not bound by practical realities. And then we get this big response of practical reality. Um, so I just say that to people. I say it at different stages in the wave spell, like live up this freedom because it's not like you just stepped into a new threshold where it's always going to be free. Because that can be the trick. Like, wow, I finally made it. I'm flying in my work. My relationship is dialed in. And that's why this time supports a certain kind of human confidence because there is something set free, but it doesn't stay there. It's just this moment to get clarity and to feel really close to divinity. And then we live here and we do this hard work of being human. And that is so evident in the planetary moment, even though we will also see true manifestation in our life, the outcome of this time of intention and kind of wishing.
Yeah, I'm really curious, because it's the first time that I'm really writing the 13 moons intentionally, month by month. So I'm really, really curious to discover how the planetary moon will unfold because I can so much feel the build up towards the grounding of all these processes and seeing what it shows up like in the physical reality and how it manifests. So I'm really taking this time right now to really work with being in question mode and waiting for clarity to show up, like in the waves. So I'm expecting clarity because I know I'm in the solar moon and I'm carrying a clear intention to gain clarity in this time about certain processes in my life. And at the same time, I know that by kind of accepting that clarity will come and just directing my awareness to the possibility of seeing it when it shows up. Like today, I had this moment when out of nowhere, suddenly a piece of information that I had come up with in a conversation about something to do with developing my business. It suddenly showed up in the middle of the day. The first conversation was yesterday, and then this one bit of information just showed up very clearly, and I could feel my body say yes. That was so beautiful to be present and to just notice that it sort of came out of nowhere. Like I wasn't thinking so much about the conversation yesterday, and then I was analyzing it, and then I got the clarity. It kind of moved, like it just came and I was starting to see something, and then it came in front of me and I was realizing that, this is the thought that's coming to my mind, and then it clicked. I was like, okay, so now I know my intention, like what's my next step? But this next step felt already like it's an intention for the near future. It's not just like a
Yeah.
little answer to a question I have right now. It's a question that's to do with decisions I want to make regarding ways I develop my life in the future. It could be also in the distant future. And it just comes in these kind of really like solar flares, like suddenly something is clear, and I can really feel how it's building up towards the planetary moon that I will start to ground. I can really feel it in my body. Like I don't feel the need to ground things, these questions and these processes yet, but I feel it building up.
Yeah, I agree. And it does. It feels like a little nexus that there isn't really any past or future. Like maybe there's a near future, but that this, like you could just say that solar is like enlightenment. It's the same thing. These are about connection to the sun. So it is a time where you feel really enlightened, and that usually is a focused time, like I'm enlightened to this moment, and this moment you could feel it playing out like weeks around, but it's tighter than the whole year or your whole lifetime. And I mean, I hate to always be like northern hemispheric, centric. I'm hello, Australia, etc., Africa, if you listen. I would have to be hearing from people in the southern hemisphere how they do the calendar when it's kind of an inverse of seasons. But there's something very easy to see in nature and the solar moon about the stirring of spring and the end of winter, and not just the time stamp that we're going to go into spring in a short time or within the solar moon, but just that you feel the sun returning and the way that our, earth and realm responds. And that's stirring in us, same as in little like sprouts of seeds and so forth, is kind of, I feel like that called to be engaged with light. And so it's all connected.
Yes. Yes. So if we try to grasp all this beautiful philosophy and ideas that we're talking in the last 45 minutes to a practical thought for our listeners. So how could how could the understanding of what's going on energetically in the solar moon show up practically for people? What are the challenges that this month can bring for us to be able to receive this clarity or to work with the sun energy? What kind of challenges can show up in our life in this kind of time?
I think it can be exhausting, especially toward the end, because it's a sprint. It's kind of like a fast-paced time. I think, like I said, it can be a delusion in the making if you don't hold like there's finality. It's like a time that is actually has a container. We're in the container of light, but we're going to be moving back toward obvious shadow. Planetary means that the sun casts shadow because there are objects. Right now, we're just in the light stream. Nothing is obscuring that. Um, and like connected to that because it feeds into the human ego, meaning, oh my God, I can do whatever I want. And we're not doing times sent we're being like obscuring what's going on in the world, Alon and I, in this conversation, but I'll just use it abstractly that in the world right now is full of egotism, like I'm going to do whatever I want, and that is part of the if you were not following Mayan calendar, which very few people do, like you would just feel this time as like, you know what, I'm going to do whatever I want. I have permission, I have freedom, and it is earned. We built toward this moment, but if you're not recognizing that that's not going to be true a moon from now, like think of it, we have the planetary moon, which I've described as kind of the like, hey, get real, we're on the planet. You got to pay attention to the impact of your actions on a whole planet. And then the spectral in the future is the dissolution of so much of what we create, just redistribution of it taken from our hands and given away. And we'll get there in these conversations, but just like this is not the way it is now, because sometimes people can step into this permission to be godlike without recognizing it's just a moment. It's earned, but it's not a new frontier. It's just a phase. So I think those are my cautions is just like enjoy it while you have it. And if you feel like other people are being really egotistically like, I'm going to do whatever I want, take space to just know that they will also hit their limitations. Because maybe that's how I feel as a very sensitive, highly tuned person that is just like kind of intense when everyone's just on fire all around me as well. Like, ah, it's very fast moving. It's like pinging around as these little whatever light microbes that make up internet life.
I like that description. Yeah, I can relate to what you're saying. It's like a moment, it's this feeling that everything is possible a moment before we realize what actually is possible and what we actually are able to do and what we actually are able and want to do. All of this human limitation of the light and the shadow on this planet, that every material thing casts a shadow. Even the most, I don't know if you can say, positively engineered piece of material that's really meant to just improve everything around it, even that casts a shadow. And so eventually it gets older, and eventually it starts to wear out, and eventually it needs to be renewed in some way. And this is just the finitism of reality on this planet. And so the solar tone is just this moment before we remember again that we're here to experience a human experience, and the human experience is a finite experience. And that's a great part of the charm and the glory about the human experience, is that it's a temporary experience. And so we're actually given permission to try things out, because it's not like the trials and errors that we experience will stay forever. So might as well give it a try. And this is what also makes this world such a wild world, in the human world, because, like you said, people can actually choose in so many ways what they do with themselves and their lives, and how they affect and influence the environment. And in some places, maybe freedom is more, the illusion of freedom, I call it, is more common than in other places. But still, as human beings, we have a lot of freedom, even if we live in India or in anywhere that life is more simple in our Western materialistic civilization. So maybe from my side, I would tell our listeners that this is a good time to recognize what is clear to us, and it is a good time to recognize where our energy wants to go, what excites us when we think about it, about our lives, about our future, about our near future, about our present as well. And to just kind of notice that. And maybe if you want to see more of that in your life, just choose a moment and just kind of close your eyes and ask for it with intention from God, from the universe, from whoever you communicate with when you're communicating with spirit. Because soon enough, in the planetary moon, we'll start to see phenomenons manifesting into material structures and material movements and commitments and obligations and practical moves that we will be asked to do from our beautiful intentions for our lives. So yeah, I think we'll conclude it here for this time. I wonder if there's anything else you want to add.
Well, thank you, because I always have like, wait, I want to say one more thing. I don't know if people are familiar with the Greek mythological story of Icarus, who, was trapped on an island with his father, and all these feathers of the seabirds would fall down, and they took wax and they escaped the island by making wings with the feathers and the wax. And the little boy Icarus loved flying so much that he just kept flying higher and higher. And his father said, be careful. And it was true. The sun melted the wax. So then the feathers all fell away and he fell to the sea and drowned. And I just think of that as kind of the dilemma of the solar moment and just something to recognize in yourself. It's just that's the difference between enjoying the confidence and perseverance and breakthrough speed and clarity of the solar moment versus portraying that, like, now I finally got it. Now I finally know what to do with my life, and it's just going to be like this all the time. And I'm not suggesting that you know, there are a bunch of listeners who are in that trap, but I just try to make it that clear. Like, soar and fly and commune with the sun and feel enlightenment. And then, just know it's another beautiful 28-day moment to have that. Enjoy it. I think that's sort of like my message.
Beautiful. So it was indeed a very, I feel, more spiritual conversation we had this time, because I feel that the whole idea of a solar moon or a solar lunar aspect, like the solar tone, it's the solar moment in the lunar phase. So I like to describe it like it's a moment when we have emotional clarity. Like in our lunar element, inner lunar element, we have the sun shining. And so it is a time more of abstract movement and energetic movement and consciousness, whereas the next moon will be much more on the ground, on the earth, on the planet level, talking, practical, real life stuff. So I'm really happy we got to meet like we do, even though we're both very persistent people. We know what it takes for us to meet every month over again and synchronize from different sides of the planet. So I want to thank you again for this journey we're on together. It's really building up to be something with much, much value for me personally, and I'm sure for the people that continuously follow us as well, and people that will follow us in the future and hear this. And to our listeners, I remind that if you want to get more of Lisa's wisdom, then you've been keep maintaining a beautiful podcast, Natural Time, on Spotify, in which you talk about the wave spells and 13 moons on a daily, not every day, but you speak about the day on a particular day, and you've been doing that for a long time. And also people that want to go deeper with Lisa can find her on resonanttruth.com and get in touch and schedule a personal session if feel could help them. And also for me, you can find me online, Alon More Natural Time on Instagram, and my website naturaltime.love, and get in touch with me for more information and about what I do and how I can help you make positive changes in your life through connecting to your inner strength and understanding the challenges you have and how you were born to be able to outcome them. So thank you very, very much, Lisa. And I'm really looking forward to seeing you again soon in the planetary moon.
I wanted to point out to anyone who's tracking the whole series that Alon has been in a minimum of 3 different countries throughout our conversation of this year. And so he brings the wisdom of place, right? It's an insertion of an energy of place, and that India is very different than Germany, which was one of your locations, or Israel, where you're from. And so I really enjoy, I'm always in the same attic, but I enjoy that our conversation is kind of infused with these other frequencies because of your travel. And then I
Yes,
also want to say, because I'm terrible at marketing and branding, but I do want anyone listening to know that I used to make calendars for the calendar, the 13 moon calendar, and I just decided I would again. So if you go to resonanttruth.com, you will also see that I produced a calendar that I think is very helpful for working through the 13 moons. You can check it out. Thank you
beautiful.
for doing
Thank you for doing that too. So we will see each other again soon. Until then, I
Yes,
wish you pleasant moments of inner solar flares, and enjoy the ride. And
all the light.
yes, we will meet on the planet level very soon.
We will. Okay, great. Thanks, everyone.
You see you soon.